I'm pleased to be with two leaders at the helm of MASA, the Michigan Association of Superintendents and Administrators, Executive Board President, Dr. Glenn Maleyko, and Executive Director, Dr. Tina Kerr. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us, Doug.
Now, our topic today is how these two leaders, Glenn and Tina, have worked closely together as a cohesive leadership team at MASA. Glenn and Tina, let's kick off by your telling us a bit about your professional backgrounds and also describing MASA in a nutshell.
Sure. So I'll start, Doug. I started as an educator in '95, actually, as a substitute teacher. I've worked as an elementary teacher, elementary assistant principal, middle school principal. I was hired then. Actually, I got a transfer as a principal, and then I was the HR director working for former state superintendent Brian Whiston. In 2015, I became the superintendent of Dearborn Schools. So that experience that I just mentioned, all in Dearborn Public Schools, 28 years, very passionate about the school district and working together. And the one thing that I do know is with the district is I've been in all these positions, so I have a great understanding of the different levels of education in our district, and it transforms into MASA and understanding what a superintendent has to deal with. I would say this, that I do think it's important to support each other, and I think that's what MASA does. We have over 560 members. And I got to say, my involvement has been critical. Again, I learned from Brian Whiston, who was my mentor. I think everyone helps, and I now mentor people, superintendents and others. And it's just a great supportive group that understands what superintendents deal with, because the fact of the matter is there's only one superintendent in every district. And the only way to really understand is to talk to others who are dealing with similar circumstances. So for me, it's provided me with a tremendous amount of support, especially when I was a new superintendent. A couple of the conferences that MASA has, great networking, developing relationships. We have one in September and one in January every year, along with lots of other opportunities throughout the year. And to me, it's just been fantastic to be able to engage other superintendents under the leadership of Dr. Kerr and MASA. So what I would say then is in 2019, I made a decision that I did want to help and do more. And that's when I decided to run for the MASA board. So this is now my 5th year. And so, again, I want to give back. I think it's very important that we help others. And I enjoy being part of it. Again, it's a great group. We deal with a lot of situations that directly impact students in the class, and we deal with situations that impact other superintendents. And so that's why I'm here. And then I spent time last year as the president-elect, as voted in by my colleagues, and now serving as president this current school year.
Great.
Thanks, Glenn. And like Glenn, I took a very similar path as far as teacher to principal to curriculum director and then to the superintendency. So I have been with the association. I started my 8th year. And when I first came to the association, I had the opportunity to serve as the deputy executive director for 5 years. And now I'm in my 3rd year as executive director. I feel very blessed to have people like Glenn that I continue to grow and learn from, and who help us ensure that MASA, as Glenn said, provides exceptional supports and services to our members. I always refer to the association kind of in these different buckets of support. First one is member benefits. Unfortunately, we're in a time where our members occasionally, if not more so than not, need legal support. And that's what we like to try and offer them to ensure that they're successful in their current position, or help them transition to another position that may be a better fit. We do offer, most districts aren't fortunate enough to have a communications director. So we have a communications team that we help support them in if they have a crisis or something where they need us to take the lead and draft some materials for them, we do that as well. A big part of what we do is advocacy. We have a government relations team that, basically lobbies on behalf of our districts across the state. With 560 plus districts, there are very differing needs of what each of our different members need in general from our lobby efforts. So we have to try and find that common ground and make sure that we're supporting all our members. And then, as Glenn said, the last pillar I kind of look at is that professional development piece. What can we do to ensure that the field continues to maintain being lifelong learners, has the latest and newest things? Right now, we're very involved in AI, which many of our members don't want to be involved in, but unfortunately it's here. So we try and always stay a step ahead to help our members make sure they stay a step ahead, because they're very busy people. And it is obviously very difficult sometimes to step away and be a learner yourself. So that's what the association provides. So that's a little bit about us and myself too. So thanks, Doug.
Thank you. Now, you're both obviously highly visible leaders of MASA and also public spokespersons for the association. How would you define your respective leadership roles?
So I'll go first. Obviously, as executive director, I feel like we function similar to what a school district does. The CEO or the superintendent is in charge of all the day-to-day, how the association is managed, how it runs. I do take care of all that, but I do rely heavily on my board, because they're sitting practitioners in the field, and they help me ensure that maybe my thinking of what a superintendent needs at this point is correct and accurate. I feel very fortunate that I've always had great relationships, especially with the board president. So if I'm thinking about something, Glenn's who I call, and I'll say, hey, what about this, before we take it to the full board. So we really do have that relationship and the definition of our roles that I think make us stronger together, because I don't just look at Glenn as my boss. I consider him a friend and a colleague and someone that I can learn and grow from in my position as well. So it's very fluid, but ultimately I do try and handle all the day-to-day. The board looks at the budgets, the audits, those types of things to make sure we're functioning appropriately. But I really use them more as my sounding guide of here's what's pressing in the field and what would they like to see us do to address those issues.
And I'll just add that, my role here is, really to provide support for Tina as she's running the association. That's what the entire board really, our role. Obviously, we have oversight on budget and other things. I will say one of my proudest moments is actually hiring Tina my second year on the board. So we have the role of hiring the executive director, and then the executive director, similar to the school district, would go and hire their staff and implement, the strategic plan, the goals, all the things that we are engaged in. I would say too, Tina is an outstanding leader, and she's provided support to many superintendents across the state. I've seen it personally with her in her role, and she's helped me. And again, I think we help each other as well, because we are fellow colleagues on the board. We can collaborate. There's a nice network, but ultimately we do have a responsibility to, be in the spotlight across the state of advocating for students. I should say not spotlight, but just advocacy, and representing superintendents to make sure that superintendents are there to get the support so they can get the job done of supporting students in their districts and their staff.
So, what strategies have you put in place to make sure that this very, very critical working relationship between the board president and the executive director remains healthy and really productive over the long run?
So I feel like I'm very fortunate. We do have, issues that arise as would any association or in any district. And because of Glenn and I's relationship, I feel like if I know something's coming, it'll just be a phone call, a text message. But one thing I do for the entire board, because while my relationship with Glenn is critical, so is that relationship with the whole board, because I want to make sure they all feel like they're getting the same information so they can be making decisions and feeling knowledgeable about them. So I do a Friday focus, which is a weekly update to the board of here's what was on my plate this week, here's what I've done, here's what's upcoming, to make sure that the board is aware on a week per week basis. And then as an association, we push out our Monday memo, which goes out every Monday, and that goes to the entire membership. So the board is seeing twofold. They're seeing me personally, what I've focused on as the executive director, but then also they're seeing how does that play out into what the whole association is doing as we move forward. We have a summer retreat. We've tried to do some different things to build the relationships more outside of the formality of a relationship, because we do all get along. They're all just wonderful people and we enjoy each other's company. So we try and take advantage of those opportunities as well. But I always try and remember I have 7 people that are extremely busy. And so I try to make sure I maximize our time together and be respectful of the time that they're giving, because these are not high paid positions, as you may know, Doug. In fact, it's free. I just ask them to be present and to do all they can to support our members. So that's about it for me for what we've worked on.
And I would just say that, I believe having positive relationships is essential to be successful in any position, any role. And that goes with working with Tina and the executive board and just getting to know people, working together collaboratively. I think during, we employ certain strategies to add to what Tina said. We all learned, and we're having this meeting right now via Zoom during the pandemic. That's a normal thing. However, so we have members from across the state, but we also understand the in-person is very important as well for those relationships. And I know Tina mentioned the retreat and other things. So we divide it up to make sure that we have virtual meetings and we also have in-person meetings in Lansing. And I think they're very important as well, which is why, building those relationships, I would say, the conferences or other sessions we go to are fantastic. But the fact that you can also, be in a trusting relationship with Tina, with the board, whether that be, after conferences or sessions and just talking about things and associating in the evening is very, I think, important, because we get to know who we are as people and support each other. And I think that's the one thing with superintendents is like, when you're running a board meeting or you're involved or you're on TV or in the spotlight, we're not superhumans. We're superintendents and we're still people and we still have families as well. And that's what I like to get to know the people on the board, to know their families and who they are, so that we can build that trust. I would say that I trust Tina. I think she trusts me, and we can talk about sensitive issues, and we know that we're ultimately there to support the association. And I always go back to supporting students in Michigan.
Great. Now, MASA has what you might call a pretty complex governance structure. You've got an executive board, if I recall correctly, a council, and in addition to 3 standing committees. Tell us a bit about the roles of each of these bodies and how you two interface with each of these governance entities.
Sure. So obviously the executive board is a 7-member board that's elected by members from across the state. And so we are really the ones that, have the authority to implement decisions within the association. The most important being hiring the executive director, who then goes and implements all the, the strategic plan, all the goals of the association. Her responsibility then is to hire the staff for MASA so that we can run conferences, advocate in Lansing for legislation and other things. So that board, has oversight of the budget, oversight of, Tina's contract and making sure that she's taken care of so that we can do the work we need to do. I would then say that the other thing is that we have 10 regions in the state. And so we have a council as well. And the council is very important at representing all aspects of the state. In fact, that's what I really enjoy being. I know that in the executive board, we also now have rules that, you can't have more than 2 executive members from one region. And so I think that's important because there's different things going on in the Upper Peninsula. Former president, I could talk to Angie MacArthur, past president, what she's dealing with. So what we do is we have it divided up. So we have members that will come on the council, 3 from each region, and there's a president that is elected from each region, and we have meetings monthly. What we do to make it convenient, as Tina mentioned, we're very busy in things, is that we'll have the executive board meeting monthly. We'll have that meeting, at 9 a.m. in the morning, and then the council will meet at 10:30. Again, the importance of the council is really to get a feel from all the things in the state. And even though they don't have necessarily the authority that the board has for approving budgets and other things, it is a very important aspect. You mentioned about relationships. I think that's part of it. But also, I do think, legislation in Lansing is so important to our jobs. And that's also where that body will look to eventually approve positions that we'll take on pending legislation. So within that, we have standing committees, and we have a conference planning committee, a government relations committee, and a professional growth and leadership committee. And those committees, what they will do is bring their recommendations to the council for discussion, depending what it may be. Again, the government relations recommends positions to take, and we'll discuss it in the council. And then the council will actually formally vote to approve positions we may take, for example, on budgets that the state may be offering, or right now, a big hot topic has been prohibited subjects of bargaining that got passed through the state. So those are just a few examples of what occurs. And all of that is wrapped into the board constitution. So any member, if they were interested, can run for the board. And that's what I did. And I was elected. There was an election elected by your fellow colleagues. And then on the executive board, we also have the officer seats. What happens is the board then appoints, makes a formal vote for who's going to be the president-elect, which then becomes the president. And then so for example, I'll have 1 more year as past president, which will give me a total of 6 years serving on the board.
I don't have a lot to add because Glenn covered it impeccably about, our current structure. The one thing that I would just, I think, say is that our success as an association is so dependent on the leaders that volunteer their time to be a part of all these groups that Glenn said. And one thing that we found over the last few years, especially after the pandemic, there was so much isolation that they felt, being kind of shut off from the world. And as Glenn said, we were Zooming and that human contact and those human conversations that sometimes feel clunky when you're in a Zoom room versus in person. I feel like our members came out of the pandemic even more eager to serve. And that kind of goes back to what I've always said, that just great leaders are servant leaders. And I think it's just alive and well in Michigan because we have people stepping up left and right for our standing committees. We have multiple people running for our board. We're never without members coming forward and saying, hey, I'd like to serve and support. So as an executive director, I feel very blessed to have a state and have members who are so passionate about the work. So as Glenn said, we do a great job. We have all these different levels, but it's really the people that make us tick. So I want to thank them for that for sure.
Now, to conclude our time together, and I know you both have extremely demanding schedules, why don't we drill down a bit and tell our viewers about 1 or 2 major issues you two are working very closely together on, and initiatives in a sense you're spearheading as a final discussion topic.
So I'll jump in first because Glenn knows this is all I seem to eat, sleep, and breathe right now is MASA about, in 2019, made the decision to sue the Office of Retirement Services because we were finding that superintendent salaries were being scrutinized, and there was this arbitrary NSI, which is called a normal salary increase, and superintendents could not exceed that in any given year, based on what the Office of Retirement said was a normal raise. So if they said, hey, we're going to set the state raise at 3%, you can't get 3.25. The 2.5 would not count towards your retirement. So it created a lot of loss of funds for our leaders, but more importantly, it just created this sense of unfairness. Why were superintendents who are in tough positions anyway, really being almost deterred from wanting to be in these positions? So we set out to embark on this lawsuit. I won't go through all the gory details of the last almost 7 years of us continuing to fight it through the various court levels, but ultimately we made it all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court came back and said, you know what, that normally salary increase, you're right. That should not be arbitrarily placed on superintendents. But they didn't finish the decision. And so here we are now, frantically looking at the opinion that was giving and trying to appeal it again, because right now what our Office of Retirement Services is saying, you know what, we'll instead of your best 3 years, we're going to say it's your first 3 years. No other retirement system in the United States or in the world would base a retirement on your first 3 years. If I've been in the system 30 years, I'm trying to build and I'm paying into a system based on my salary. So our lawsuit was a big deal, but now it's an even bigger deal. And it doesn't just impact superintendents, it impacts anybody that is not part of a collective bargaining agreement. That's the piece of the lawsuit that we have to get resolved. And honestly, Glenn knows we're looking at, can we fix this legislatively? What other options do we have if we cannot get this resolved through the court system? So it is our number one priority right now. It's what our focus is. And in the meantime of that, you know, communities are in unrest, the kind of lack of civility that's happening and what's happening with our boards and superintendents. So Glenn, you might want to expand on that, but really ORS for us has been first and foremost initiative that we're working together on.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I do see this as one of the most important issue really facing the members. And ultimately it will impact students because it's going to sustain whether superintendents want to go into the profession, remain in the position, or stay in your district. One of the ludicrous things in the system is that, so for example, I've been in this district now, my 9th year as superintendent, but if I were to leave the district and go to another district, I could actually it would be do a reset, so it would be advantageous to my pension. I've told my board members that, and they're like, well, that's ridiculous, that doesn't make any sense. And I would just say it's a huge issue. Like, I'm talking to superintendents all over. I also have other administrators in my district that are now concerned too, because sometimes ORS calls and does an audit, and we're very suspicious sometimes of what really the motives are, because retirement systems, we've all paid into it, and it should be for the people that worked over the many years. And again, you know, for me, it's 28, but for superintendents, for example, or administrators to like apply for retirement and still waiting on a check for 8 months is just not a fair system. And so it's very important we do this. And again, it would impact kids, because if you have superintendent turnover or people not going into districts, it would hurt. And I think that's where school boards are now really interested in this as well. So I see it as the number one, you know, issue. Doug, I know you mentioned two things, and so I just would jump on the second piece that I know Tina and I have worked very closely, and I can speak to it, is just supporting superintendents. Tina does an outstanding job. She talked about legal support, but I got to tell you, I was in part of our structure also, we're affiliated with the National AASA Association. And so we go to that conference annually, but there's also a leadership conference for the executive director the past president, incoming president. And we were there last year at the conference, and I was next to Tina, and she's on the phone, and literally there was like 7 or 8 calls within a 2-day period of different superintendents that needed legal support. And I got to tell you, I needed support too. So it happened to me. And again, I've been in the district a long time, but what's happened is boardrooms have become political hotbeds for things that are not even happening in your district. And they've become very, during the pandemic, I would say a loss of civility in a lot of ways. And so superintendents have become targets, not only by sometimes the public, but by board members, and board members that are now being elected to boards. And so one of the things, that I really have priding myself on, and I'm willing to even say that I went through this, all these things are public. I had some board members that tried to violate my rights. It's a public record, and I had to stand up and defend myself. And Tina was there for me. I've succeeded. I've come out on top, and thanks to her and MASA. But I'm just an example. While I was dealing with this, I had superintendents, because I'm the president. They knew that I went through some things, and I did mention this in September publicly in front of all the superintendents. They've been calling me to ask me, well, how do you deal with this? And I said, well, call Tina. She's going to help you. But I can give advice. But that's why this is so important, because I was contacted by Jennifer Chambers from the Detroit News, because we had superintendents that are turnover, either losing jobs, retiring, or leaving early. And I've talked to some of them. I consider a lot of them either colleagues or friends. And people are asking, what's going on with superintendents? And every other day you could see a new article of someone leaving. And even in Wayne County, I'm 9 years. I'm in the second tier of the most senior superintendent in Wayne County, 9 years. There's been turnover in our body within the county. And so this is where I pride on working with Tina, and I appreciate what she does, because I can tell the story of what I've done and help others. And I'm going to do a session at the conference in January on this specific topic. But I could also tell you that that's where Tina really steps up and is able to support. And she got me in touch with counsel. And again, I've come out on top. I'm in a good situation right now. And I love, working in Dearborn schools. One of the things I'll just say, I've told my administrators, because Dearborn is the 3rd largest district in the state, is that it's like I've told my administrators in the buildings, I said, look, they didn't like to see what was happening. And I've even had union heads and others that have come and say, why is this happening with Dr. Maleyko in these meetings? It's not proper. I said, it's okay. Because you know what? I'd rather them come at us in a board meeting and have these things going on rather than with students in the buildings. And so that's how we work together. And that's what superintendents do. They will do what is necessary to make sure that ultimately in the classroom, it's all about the students. And a lot of times these people come to the board meetings, they're not there for the students or the betterment of the community. They have political agendas. So that's one thing I know I kind of went on this, but this is something I'm very passionate about, because I went through it. And I can tell you a lot of other superintendents are, and that's the support that Tina provides. And, we're willing to talk about it publicly at these conferences and meetings.
Well, we so appreciate your leadership, Glenn, because you're right. It's very difficult, Doug, as you know, for leaders at this time. So Glenn, they definitely learn from Glenn's example. So
Great. Well, I want to thank the two of you for taking time from your extremely busy schedules, excuse me, to tell us about MASA, the great work it's doing, and how you two work together, providing essential leadership. And I guess it's Thursday today, so it's not too early to wish you a great weekend and also happy holidays.
thanks,
Take
Doug.
care. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Happy holidays. Appreciate your time.